Uh, Now we're going to have the national anthem. It's going to be sung by Barry Cooper, and we'd ask that you stand as he leads us in the national anthem. Oh, sing, can you sing by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched was so gallantly streaming, and the rockets running along, the bombs bursting here gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave on the land of the free and the home of the brave? Please join me in welcoming our senior host for the day, Mike Froof.
It's Frou, just like Little Bunny Frou Frou. Yeah. And no one will ever forget it from now on. Well, thank you everyone for coming today. I know for those of you that aren't part of VA, there's a big Secretary's Town Hall event today. So for all of you, we can all DVR it and watch it later on. I'm sure it'll be on demand back at our office. But I'm very happy to see so many people here today. So I was worried when we had the conflict that it wouldn't be quite as filled. So thank you all for this very important event. And as Ms. McCallum said, that this has been going on for about 7 years. So it's a time that we get a chance to recognize all of our LGBT employees and veterans as well, whom we're here to serve all the time. I want to thank Georgia. Thank you for putting this on, and the Office of Diversity and Inclusion for getting us together in a program that represents our commitment to an inclusive environment and a workplace for all of our employees. I want to recognize someone I admire very much, that a veteran whom I come to work to serve every single day, Ann Murdoch, who's going to talk to you a little bit later today, and her family who came in. You have some from out of town. Her children are here. She said last week her son had just graduated. Congratulations. It just gets better. You're going to put on a suit in a couple years and come to work every day. The theme of today's program is It Takes a Rainbow. And I didn't know this, so I had a chance to look it up. And I know Ann said she looked up the same type of thing. But the rainbow became the symbol of pride for the gay community in the 1970s, thanks to Gilbert Baker, an artist and also a veteran. In 1978, Baker designed the first modern gay pride flag at the request of Harvey Milk, his friend. Some of you might have heard of him as the first openly gay administrator of a major city, San Francisco, and also a veteran. Baker's first flag was handmade and combined 8 stripes, and I definitely have to read these. Each of them had a different symbolism: pink for sex, red for life, orange for healing, yellow for sunlight, green for nature, blue for art, indigo for harmony, and violet for the human spirit. And the original gay pride flag flew in the San Francisco Freedom Day Parade in 1978, so it's been around for a long time. Later the same year, Harvey Milk was assassinated, and when the San Francisco activists marched in protest of the assassination, they marched with Baker's flag, with a few changes. It dropped 2 colors. They dropped pink, because in 1978 they couldn't mass produce pink, and they dropped indigo because they wanted to have an even number of colors, 3 and 3, because they actually tore the flag in half and put half and half on each side of the street as they marched. Gilbert Baker died a few months ago, but his legacy lives on through the rainbow flag. Diversity and inclusion are more than just legal obligations for organizations and for communities. They're deeply rooted in our culture and our values, our I care values for integrity, commitment, advocacy, respect, and excellence. We live by moral integrity and exhibit our commitment by treating all of those that we work with and we serve with respect. VA is committed to sustaining a long-term climate of diversity and providing a supportive, welcoming, and inclusive work environment. Over the past several years, VA has done a lot with respect to implementing policies and programs to reflect this. Since 2009, the Secretary has included sexual orientation and gender identity as protected categories in his EEO, his diversity and inclusion, and his no fear policies that he reiterates every single year. ODI, the Office of Diversity and Inclusion, has a lot of LGBT material, and I think some of it's here today, and you can find it on our intranet. VBA's own Diversity and Inclusion Group, and Lois Schoon is here somewhere. Lois Schoon is over there. She's actually started a campaign in the last several months going out to all of our regional offices and conducting a specific LGBT training for our staff in the field as well as for us in DC. As a testament to our commitment to the LGBT community, VA established a department work group, an LGBT work group in 2012. Its mission is to develop ideas and recommendations to identify and address any VA LGBT employees' needs and concerns, and to make sure VA has an inclusive work environment. The pace of change in diversity and inclusion is probably the fastest I've seen in my entire 20 years here in DC, which is a rocket pace of change. The LGBT work group fields hundreds of emails and calls addressing questions and concerns from employees and veterans themselves. The volume of these inquiries increased dramatically following the repeals of DOMA, which was several years ago, Don't Ask, Don't Tell, and the Supreme Court decision concerning same-sex marriage. I know what it did for us in VBA, and I know it had the same impact across all of our administrations and how we interact with the veterans that we serve. This year, the work group created a transgender employee workplace transition guide. This is we are one of the first federal agencies to have such a guide, and although I don't think it's implemented yet, I think it's imminent. That's fantastic. Well, as I wrote this over the weekend, it was good work, Georgia. That's just in time, taking care of our employees. This guide provides information on laws, policies, and tips to employees as well as supervisors and staff to smooth and help transition for employees who identify as a gender other than the one that they were born with and are undergoing gender transition in the workplace. The goal of that is to assist employees and managers in navigating what may be something that they're not used to seeing or have never gone through before. When I think of a rainbow, the first thing I think of personally is Dorothy and finding a path to get somewhere over the rainbow. And to me, that's the goal of diversity, because it's not just diversity, it's diversity and inclusion. When you picture a rainbow, you picture all the different colors, and they come together to make something beautiful. The work we're doing at VA reflects commitment to our employees and the veteran community and our celebration of diversity. Our workforce reflects America's great diversity, and that equips us to better help our veteran community as they're made up of the same people. It's not enough to have diversity, which I think everyone's aware we're all unique individuals in our own way. I remember when I grew up in Japan, I spent about 4 years of my early life. You couldn't tell now, but my brother, sister, and I were all white-haired kids, and we stood out for miles. People would congregate around us and take our picture, and so we knew that we were different. My dad got out of the Army in central Missouri in a little town. I grew up in a little town of about 300, and we were probably the only 5 people that weren't related to each other in that town, and we stood out a bit. My own daughter doesn't just have 1 or 2 moms, she has 3 moms because my ex-wife married another woman several years ago. So we have a not so unique family anymore, but at the time was a fairly unique family. I think it's incumbent on us as members of a free society to ensure that we welcome that diversity into our workplace, our lives, and our hearts. That's what I think of when I think of inclusion. So it's not just diversity, it's inclusion as well. So many people have been pioneers in the LGBT community, and they've had to go through a lot of things on their own and figure it out. And I'm proud of the fact that that doesn't have to be that way anymore. That, for 7 years here, we've had resources, we're building resources for the future. I truly believe, and I'm proud to say, that we serve our veterans with pride. I'm honored to serve alongside you, and thank you very much for being here with us. And I look forward to hearing Ann talk.
Retired Lieutenant Colonel Ann Murdoch. She works in the Office of Strategic Planning in the VBA. I know you get tired of hearing people read your bio, but I'm going to do it anyway. She enlisted in the Army in 1988 as a journalist, becoming the Public Affairs Officer for the Fort Indian Town Gap, PA. Commissioned in 1992, she served as a rifle platoon leader, don't tick her off, and executive officer in the 2nd Infantry Division at Camp Hovey, Korea, and as instructor, doctrine writer in a variety of battalion staff positions at the infantry school. She commanded Headquarters and Headquarters Company, Special Operations Support Command Airborne, then the 129th Adjunct General Company Postal at Fort Bragg, North Carolina. In 2001, she became the Adjunct General Chief Personnel Officer for the Defense Foreign Language Institute, Foreign Language Center in Presidio of Monterey, California, and took a subsequent tour as the Adjunct General for 1st Recruiting Brigade at Fort Meade, Maryland. Following completion of the Command and General Staff College at Fort Leavenworth, Kansas, she was assigned as the Chief of Planning and Deputy G1 Personnel Officer for the 10th Infantry Division Mountain in Fort Drum, New York, and was the Deputy J1 for Combined Joint Forces 76 at Bagram Air Force Base in Afghanistan. Ms. Murdoch completed her military career as the Chief of Officer Access Policies on the Army staff at the Pentagon. Additionally, she worked special projects for the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Manpower and Reserve Affairs concerning improved oversight of recruiting activities and publications of the Army's diversity plan. Among her accomplishments at the Pentagon, she was responsible for updating 7 Army regulations upon the repeal of Don't Ask, Don't Tell. Thank you. She holds a master's degree of business administration. Her awards include the Legion of Merit, Bronze Star, Defense Meritorious Service Award, Meritorious Service Award, Army Commendation Medal, Army Achievement Medal, Parachutist Badge, and the German Parachutist Badge. There's a difference between the two. She enjoys bicycling and is a private pilot. She lives in Springfield, Virginia with her family. It gives me a great pleasure to present our keynote speaker for the day, retired Lieutenant Colonel Ann Murdoch.
Thank you so much. Ms. Mitchell, Mr. Frew, Ms. Coffey, guests, friends, colleagues, fellow VA employees and veterans, thank you so much for being here today, and I am honored that you're here. I'd like to point out some special guests. Mr. Frew's already introduced my dad, my wife Karen, and my kids. Just awesome people. Some other guests we have from outside of the VA. We have a couple members of the Transgender Education Association, of which I'm a member. The boards, they're waving to us now. We have James Parrish, the Executive Director of Equality Virginia, is with us. From Walter Reed Army Medical Center, we have Ellen Apatoff, the Assistant to the Director of the Behavioral Health Directorate, and the leads for Transgender Service, the Transgender Service Initiative. And with her is the Chief of Customer Service of Walter Reed, Sarah Burst. Hopefully I said your name correctly. Burchet. Thank you. So before I get started, I just want to give a hand and a shout out to the outstanding work that the committee did to put this all together. Can we give them a round of applause, please? And how about another big round of applause for Barry's wonderful rendition of the national anthem. That was incredible. We worked on the same floor for almost 3 years, and I never knew that was there. It's like, wow. I knew he was there. I didn't know that song was there, that kind of music was there. Georgia said I should relay this to you. I didn't have it in my prepared remarks, but I'll go ahead and do that. About a year ago, when I was out shopping for new clothes, getting ready to transition, I was in Macy's, and I saw this suit, and I really liked the color of it. And I thought, well, maybe it's a little bright for work, you know? But I thought, one day, I'm going to want everybody to see me. And I thought about being here. Here I am. And I'll also say this now. I'm not going to make it through this dry-eyed, so I'm ready for it. I'm not going to avoid something because it's hard. I'm going to talk about it because it's hard and it's important. When the sunlight strikes raindrops in the air, they act like a prism and form a rainbow. The rainbow is a division of white light into many beautiful colors. Some of you know where that comes from. But as Mr. Frew kind of mentioned, we think of several things when we think of rainbows. We have certain associations with rainbows. One thing about a rainbow is it's huge. It stretches from one horizon to the other horizon. It fills the sky. It's a sign of hope. It appears after the storm. It's one of the first stories in the Bible, in the book of Genesis, God's covenant. We think of Lucky Charms. You know, the pot of gold. Yeah, they're magically delicious. There's a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow, you know, and the lucky leprechaun, and it's great. And we think of Judy Garland singing so hopefully about somewhere over the rainbow. And Gilbert Baker had these things in mind when he designed the rainbow flag. Because the LGBT community is much like a rainbow, so it's a fitting symbol. It's inclusive. But we think of rainbows, a rainbow is inclusive. There's many colors in it, and they all work together. Any one of them just by itself is just a stripe. It's diverse. There's billions and billions of drops of water and an infinite gradation of colors that form such a beautiful thing, all working together. And like a rainbow, the LGBT community is large. There's about 10 million Americans who identify as LGBT, somewhere in that diverse group of people. It's hopeful and resilient. Gilbert Baker had this in mind when he designed the pride flag. He said it was in part a response to the homophobic pink triangle that the Nazis used to put on people that they were getting ready to exterminate. He said, and I quote, "They had a whole code of emblems that they used to oppress people, and we needed something to answer that." Get choked up already. Baker also added that the rainbow was perfect because of its associations with diversity, beauty, and nature. And resilience is important in this community. Violence, discrimination, and harassment against LGBTQ people is well documented, as well as disparities in employment, healthcare, and other measures. About 40% of transgender people have attempted suicide. Nearly every single trans person I know has a suicide story. Pretty much every single one. Think about that. That's really hard to deal with. This person. Roughly 24 trans people, mostly women of color, are murdered every year in the U.S. just for being trans. And now some widely known Christian leaders are advocating shooting transgender people. But still, the LGBTQ community keeps getting bigger and stronger. This community is inclusive. If you identify as LGBTQ, you are. Identity is important to everyone, regardless of how you identify. And the community is diverse. The letters stand for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. Other categories are being added at a kind of dizzying pace, such as intersect, questioning. Frankly, sometimes it's hard to keep up with all these new letters that are coming in and all these new identities. But it's great. It's great. You know, make me work for it, because people are expressing their identities and they're demanding to be recognized. And this identity cuts across every other demographic attribute: socioeconomic, racial, age, everything. Immigrant, native born. And bisexual people such as Oregon Governor Kate Brown and U.S. Representative Kristen Sinema from Arizona are increasingly raising their voices and seeking to be recognized even within this community. And then there is the T, transgender. And there's some information in your programs with some acronyms and things like that that can help people that want to understand better. According to one study by the Williams Institute, there's approximately 0.6% of adults in the United States identify as transgender. And as it explains in the programs, it's a very broad term for a very broad range of gender expressions. It's actually a minority of transgender people who seek medical transition or who fully transition socially, as I have. Although trans women like me tend to be more visible, there are roughly an equal number of transgendered men, people who are assigned female at birth but who identify as male. And some people like me have been clinically identified as having gender dysphoria, which is the unrelenting feeling that one's internal sense of self doesn't match one's external physical body. And no one knows for sure what causes gender dysphoria, but research is increasingly pointing to a complex array of factors. Scientists have found that some people have a third X or Y chromosome. They're finding that trans people have brain activity patterns similar to non-trans people of the same gender. In other words, the brain activity of trans women is similar to that of cis or non-trans women, and trans men match cis men. And we're learning more and more about how genes shape our identity, and it's way more complicated than just an either-or choice. In preparing for this event, all the advice I found on effective speaking said, tell a story. So I offer myself as a case study in why it takes a rainbow. I caution that I can only speak for myself and of my experience, and there's a saying that once you meet a trans person, you know one trans person. But here's my story. Once upon a time, there was a prince and a princess named me. And when they were very little, they just played together and they hung out and just did what little kids did. And after a while, they noticed they were different. They learned that some people are boys and some people are girls. But we're the same person. How come there's two of us, they wondered. By that point, it was time for kindergarten and all the other stuff kids did before the internet. Some of you remember that. As they made their way through the land, they encountered dragons. One was called misogyny, and it captured girls and held them prisoner. And it sounded like, you're a girl, you're just a girl, you throw like a girl, be ladylike. Girls don't do that. No girls allowed. And the dragon had a twin, and it was called homophobia. And it said things like sissy, queer, and names I can't say here. And the homophobia dragon had fists, and it often beat kids up until they were bruised and bleeding. Together, these two sang a song over and over and over that went, macho is good, sissy is bad. Macho is good, sissy is bad. And the prince and the princess heard it so much that they started to believe it. And the prince and the princess were scared. The prince didn't know if he could ever become an Iron Man king. After all, he was only half a boy. And the princess thought she would be killed. And they came up with a plan. The princess would hide in a locked tower with thick stone walls and iron bars on the window and a sturdy door with a really strong lock. And here she would be safe until they figured out what they should do. She'd lay low until they could decide on a plan. And he took the key and ventured out. Sometimes the prince pretended the princess did not exist. He didn't feel good about that, but it sure made things easier. It's for her own safety, he would think. Sometimes he would come to visit her. When can I get out? She asked. I don't know, the prince would say. It's still too dangerous. The prince had some rough times. He knew he was different than everyone else. He always worried about keeping the princess's existence secret. Every time he would visit, he made sure to cover his tracks so carefully so no one would ever know. It was hard, and he missed the princess all the time. Eventually, the prince became a warrior, and surprisingly, the prince really liked being a warrior. But this meant that the prince had to hide the princess even more carefully. Over time, the prince became a knight and married a smart, funny, wonderful woman. And they traveled all around the land protecting the kingdom. And the lady knew about the princess. The knight and his bride had children, and they were smart and strong and kind and brave. And the knight rose through the ranks, becoming respected and a trusted leader. And he even went to war in a foreign land. The knight was very proud of his family and all he had accomplished. He liked the salutes and the way people reacted when he told them he was a knight. Everything was great, except for that damn princess. His sword and his shield and his armor protected him from the dragons. By that time, there was another dragon called Transphobia. These dragons cast evil spells on people, spells of shame and guilt and fear, and every day they attacked. He thought his armor would shield him. See, he would say, I'm a knight. Knights are strong and capable and brave and don't have time to be vulnerable to these spells. But the dragons worked and worked and worked. Meanwhile, the princess was still locked in the tower. She was getting more and more restless, asking, when can I get out of the tower? I'm getting older. I don't want to die in here. No one ever knew I existed. Please help me, please. The knight felt horrible that she was still locked up. Slowly, bit by bit, the knight began letting her out of the tower for brief periods. At first, only at night when there was no one else around. Later, he would take her far away where he didn't think anybody would recognize her. Then he took her to communities where people could keep the secret. These trips made the princess very happy. But each time it got harder and harder and harder to go back into the tower. Every time she would tell the knight, see, it's okay. Nothing bad happened. It's safe for me to come out now. But the knight would say, you don't understand. Everything goes away if you come out. I'll be destroyed. And the dragons kept at it. Sometimes it got so bad the knight hated the princess. Sometimes he hated himself. The dragons slowly pushed the knight closer and closer to the edge of the pit where they could eat him and the princess and destroy everything. He tried to resist all by himself. He couldn't call for help without people finding out about the princess. When he fought in the war, he had many comrades and was never alone. But when he fought the dragons, he looked around and was totally, utterly, completely isolated and alone. He was terrified. And he didn't know how much longer he could keep up the fight. He didn't know what to do or where to turn. Each night he thought, well, I made it through one more day. If tomorrow gets too bad, I can give up and face my end. But the knight's family loved him and did what they could to push back on the dragons. And he loved them, and he realized that he was not giving them all they deserved. Because he was so busy fighting the dragons. They see defeat, he realized, as the dragons pushed him closer to the pit, and he knew he must change that. And the princess said, I can take care of them too. I love them too. I'm sweet and nice, and I think they'll like me. And the knight realized that his family would either see him be utterly defeated and destroyed, trying to fight the dragons alone and in secret, or they could see him and the princess fight the dragons together. And maybe, just maybe, survive. He would have to partner with the princess and fight full force on the dragons, stopping only when they were destroyed. They were lucky to find a wise wizard who helped many people who had been cursed with the same spell. They struggled and struggled, and early on there were times when it seemed as though they might not make it. The knight and the princess had to learn to work together, and they had to learn to forgive each other. Him for being forced to be the one to have to go out and face the world alone. She for being locked up in the tower for so many years. But slowly over time, they gained strength. And a great rainbow army formed at their side. They formed at their side to help them fight the dragons. It was trans people who had walked the fire themselves. Not only survived, but were thriving. They were brave and resilient and exceptionally generous with their time. Some of them are here in this room right now. Clergy who reassured the knight and the princess that they were not cast out, rejected by their maker. And allies who had fought their own dragons and stood shoulder to shoulder with the knight and the princess. They helped bind the wounds when the dragons lashed out. They gave strength and sustenance, and they acted as guides, sharing what they had learned on their own journeys. It took about 3 years, but little by little, the knight and the princess started to gain the upper hand on the dragons. As the knight's family got to know the princess, they accepted her more and more. They began to realize that the princess loved them every bit as much as the knight. And in many ways, they weren't that much different. The dragon's power ebbed until one day the dragons were dead. Together with the Rainbow Army, the knight and the princess had fought back from the very brink of the pit and killed them. And the knight was tired. He'd been fending off the dragons all by himself for so many years. He was ready to retire. The princess couldn't wait to show the world what she could do. And so on Thursday, August 11th, 2016, the knight stood in front of his colleagues and announced his retirement. And the next day, after work, he took off his armor for the very last time. And a week later, after an awesome vacation in the mountains of Colorado, the princess showed up for work. The end. Transition was something that I had dreamed of since I was about 5 years old, even though I had no idea what that meant. And you can imagine my trepidation walking into the office the very first day presenting as a woman. I didn't really expect any problems, but I didn't really know what to expect. What I encountered was compassion, kindness, and what I craved most, respect. I was warmly greeted by my colleagues, and then we all just got on to work. This is exactly what I wanted. All I wanted to do was blend in. To be sure, there have been challenges, but I don't want to minimize them at all. But today I want to focus on the rainbow and not on the storm. Almost overnight, my blood pressure returned to normal, my insomnia improved, my anxiety attacks vanished. I stopped taking medication for depression and an ulcer because I didn't need them anymore. I actually liked coming into the office on a Monday morning. I never knew people could be this happy. I really didn't. I'm still, nearly a year later, stunned that this dream has actually come true. I'm surrounded by friends. I'm in a position to give back to others in need of support. And I recently started a challenging and rewarding detail in appeals management. Yeah, they got me going. And most importantly, my family is doing great. I have slayed the dragons that kept me living in fear for so long. I have no secrets, and I took the biggest risk I could ever imagine in my life. What's left to hold me back? But I didn't get here by myself. It took my Rainbow Army and the love of each of you here today. Each of you here today is part of that. It took the patient and wise love of my wife living up to our wedding vows in ways we never foresaw. and working through some really challenging times, but always coming back to love. It took the love and encouragement of my two amazing children, who continue to impress me every single day. It took the stalwart love of my dad, my sister, my aunts, my brothers, who never wavered for a second in their support. There was other trans women and trans men who opened their hearts and homes to me and let me know that I was not alone. I can't overstate how important that was. I've been blessed to be under the care of two exceptionally skilled and compassionate therapists who patiently helped me work through decades of accumulated and internalized guilt and shame. There were allies in the LGBT community, friends and neighbors and clergy and organizations who advocate on behalf of trans people. It was colleagues and neighbors and clerks and a myriad of government people that just, when I went to change my documents, said, "Yes, ma'am, how can I help?" It took me at least a day to properly acknowledge everyone in my Rainbow Army, and we don't have that much time, and there's cake awaiting us. So I want to focus on the VA as both an employee and a veteran. VA is getting it right in many respects, as evidenced by the fact that VHA, the Veterans Health Administration that runs the hospitals, was named a leader in LGBTQ healthcare by the Human Rights Campaign in 2015. There is much work to be done, but there's a lot that's going great. The VHA's policy on care of transgender veterans let me know that I could expect to be treated respectfully in a VA medical facility and helped create enough trust for me to seek care from the VA. They lived up to that policy. The transition in the workplace guidelines provides a roadmap of inclusiveness for those in transition. People are looking at those things. It tells them they're welcome. It tells them they're recognized. It tells them they're respected. And soon veterans are going to be able to go online and self-select the gender with which they identify with no paperwork, no questions asked. They can do it themselves at home. The VA is hearing them and is recognizing them. And this event and all the other special emphasis programs are tangible examples of institutional inclusiveness. None of this is intended to exclude anyone who isn't in the target group, nor should be construed as taking anything away from anyone. Nor is it special rights or privileges for anyone. It's simply about ensuring equality for all and explicitly including people from groups who have experienced exclusion. And then there's individual acts of each of us here in this room. Leaders like Georgia Coffey, who's let me lean on her again and again throughout this process. She was the first person, other than medical providers, with whom I shared my plans to transition. And she probably thought I was going to pass out in her office that first time. Which maybe. My supervisor at the time, Nick Pamprin, was not only respectful and supportive, but he bent over backwards to do everything he possibly could to make things as smooth and as easy as possible during a really turbulent time in my life. So Nick, I appreciate that. It was hundreds of VA employees who have universally treated me with dignity and respect, and those who offered a sympathetic ear and a tissue, which I need, when I was having a rough time. All of you here today, and so many more that could not be with us, are part of that rainbow that not only helped me get through the most difficult thing I've ever done, something far more difficult than going to war, but have helped me get to a place far better and far beyond anything I ever imagined possible. You are all part of my Rainbow Army. And I've met lots of really amazing people in my life, and there are a lot of different ways these people have been amazing. And two of the most amazing people I choose to emulate are my mom and my uncle, who are both big parts of many, many people's rainbows. My uncle was an extremely successful white lawyer in the White House and corporate sector and a local office holder. He inspired hundreds of people, sharing his example of living with alcoholism and terminal cancer. Such was his impact that 10 years after his death, he was cited as an example of compassion and healing in the aftermath of the Columbine shootings. My mom was a homemaker and a graphic designer for textbooks. And she taught me the power of showing dignity and respect to people who might not always be treated with dignity and respect. Through her actions, she let people know, I see you, I recognize you, you are included. The outpouring of love at her memorial service was a testament to how many lives she touched. She attended the funeral of a guy she helped many, many years before and over his lifetime. She was carried into the church because she was so respected for that. That's what I want for my legacy. Every time you're part of somebody's rainbow, every time you say, I hear you, I recognize you, you are included, it matters. It matters. It matters for the person hearing and believing that, and it matters for all the people that individual will touch in a lifetime. It matters for everyone who cares about that individual. It matters everyone who identifies with that individual who is wondering, does anyone hear me? Am I recognized? Will I be included here? Your actions are magnified geometrically as they ripple through time and space as the impacts are passed from person to person and generation to generation. That's our legacy. It matters a lot. So I ask two things of you. First, take pride in what you have done. Take pride in the inclusive policies and the institutional actions that have made VA a leader in inclusiveness for LGBTQ people and everyone else. Take deep satisfaction and joy that you are a part of my rainbow and you helped lift me up from a place of deep despair to a place of such joy. You've enabled me to be a visible example to people struggling with gender dysphoria and to people struggling with a range of other issues, and showing them that it really can get better. It really does. It really can. Second, keep doing it. Please. Keep lifting each other up. Keep looking around and asking, who is not being heard? Who needs to be recognized? Who needs to be included? What policies or institutional practices do we need? What more can I do as an individual to be part of somebody's rainbow? A huge, hopeful, inclusive, and diverse rainbow. It makes the VA better for veterans and employees, and it makes us as individuals better people. Because after all, we're all in this together, and it takes a rainbow. Thank you.
And yes, and now for some closing remarks, the champion of the LGBT community in the Department of Veterans Affairs and my longtime cohort on the LGBT work group, Georgia Coffey.
Thank you, Deb. Thanks, Deb. Thank you, everybody. You know, people tell me that I speak kind of easily, and you know, it's easy to get up and talk extemporaneously. I am speechless. If anyone can leave this event today unmoved, unchanged in their attitudes, in their thoughts, even if you were already allies, then I can't imagine that you heard everything. I want to mention a few words that are often associated with diverse groups who, throughout history, have taken that plunge, that first step forward to say, I'm coming out. And I'm not only speaking about LGBT now, I'm talking about any diverse group. Words like oppression, suppression, being ostracized, being rejected, and then there's being victorious, emerging, being optimistic. But one word resonates to me more than any other word associated with all the diverse groups that come out. And I associate it with the transgender community. And I associate it because what we all just heard from Ann. And that word is courage. Can you imagine the courage it takes to do what Ann just did? And to your family, can you imagine the courage and the strength it takes these beautiful family members here? And I sense these are the children right here that I'm looking at, handsome and gorgeous. And I sense, is that Dad? Oh, Dad here? Wonderful. And sister, and I don't know who else is here. Where are you? There you are. Okay. Absolutely, absolutely. And all of you here. I know, we all know the courage it took. We know the strength it took. You are very, very special people. And Ann, you are just incredibly remarkable. You have taught us how to tap into our humanity. Every one of us in this room has a story. We have a family member that has some challenges. I won't even say similar challenges, maybe similar challenges. But you now have taught us how to deal with that, how to make something very, very positive of something that can be so daunting. I don't know that any of us will ever think the same, as I said, about your community and about you and all the people who love you. Let me say I'm very, very proud of VA. You all know I do not shy away against stating my criticisms sometimes when I have them. But Ann has shared with me the ups and the downs of her experiences, and she's been very, very positive and shared with me extraordinarily positive experiences that she has received from her VBA cohorts and clients. I thank VBA. You are going to be the models for all of VA, and every one of us should aspire to be like Mike's group and like Mike is and like all of VBA is. And yes, I don't want to sugarcoat it. I know that there have been some ups and downs. But overall, I couldn't be prouder. People who think that VA is a stodgy old conservative, perhaps not very tolerant organization, we've got something for them. We can tell them, no, we are a new VA. And thank you, Ann, for helping us discover that in us. I could go on forever. I'm so very thankful, Ann, for your bravery. I'm so very thankful for the community. I'm so very thankful for the planning committee who took the bold step, not only to invite Ann, but to put this wonderful event together. And look at you. You have filled the room on a day when your secretary is speaking as we speak. And we have no compunction about being here instead to listen to Ann. And you know what? I'll bet the secretary will be the first one to applaud us for that. So again, Ann, I thank you. I thank you all, and enjoy some cake, everybody. Thank you.
Well, that concludes our program for the day. Again, thank you very much for all who attended today. George, I remember the first time we had this, we had about half the number of people in the room, and every year it's grown more and more and more and more, and now we have a full room, and we appreciate it. So yes, please join us for some cake and some punch, and thank you again for coming to the program. Have a good afternoon.